Hello everyone. So for this particular video discussion, I will be discussing Punnet Squares and how you are going to use it in problem solving or in solving word problems, how you are going to interpret it and what are the basic details that you need to identify and write in dealing with Mendelian and non-Mendelian genetics. So as we go on this particular discussion, I want us to be familiar with the following vocabulary words that we are going to encounter. First, with genetics itself, the study of traits passed from parents to offspring, wherein it was founded by the father of genetics, Gregor Mendel, in his study on his garden, specifically the pea plants. Then it was anchored in heredity, where it was defined as the passing of traits from parents to offspring. Then a trait is said to be a genetically determined variant of a characteristic, and alleles are the different forms of a trait. So for us to further understand what these traits and alleles are, I have here an example. So let's take eye color as the trait, wherein as been said, it is a genetically determined variant of a characteristic. So there is an eye color, one characteristic. It is somewhat like a brand, okay, a brand of a specific characteristic, that is the eye color. Then since alleles are different forms of a trait, then therefore the possible alleles of eye color are blue, black, and brown. So that is how we are going to differentiate trait from alleles. Eye color is general and alleles are specific: blue, black, and brown. Okay? Now, what are these Punnet squares? So, Punnet square is a tool used to predict results in genetics. It helps you predict what offspring would look like. So, this is how it was been written. What you can see are variables expressed in upper and lower case, or specifically or most commonly a capital and a small letter coming from both parents. Okay, so the variables came from both parents to a particular variable coming from both parents. Okay, in a Punnett square, letters represent dominant and recessive alleles. So what is this dominant and recessive alleles? A capital letter stands for a dominant allele and a small letter stands for a recessive allele. Okay, so in here, let's take our example earlier. Our trait is the eye color. Now, to specify the dominant allele, which is black in color, we represent that with a capital letter. So, meaning to say that is the dominant allele, a capital letter Y, which is color black, and a recessive allele, which is brown this time, represented by a small letter. Okay, so that is how we are going to describe that particular eye color specifically with a variable using Punnett square, a capital letter to represent the dominant allele and a small letter to represent the recessive allele. Okay? Now, as we go on, most cells in your body have two alleles for every trait. So that particular eye color have two alleles. So it could be both letter Y written in capital, it could be both letter Y written in small, and others. Okay? Or it could be one capital, it could be one small. So these alleles are located on chromosomes within the nucleus. It makes up your DNA. Okay? Then, an organism with two alleles that are the same is called homozygous. And an organism that has two different alleles for a trait is called heterozygous. This is what I am talking about earlier. So again, let's take the eye color as example for the trait. where the dominant allele is written in capital letter Y is black, and the recessive allele written in small letter y is brown. Okay, so this, um, if you can see here, I have written both capital letter Y as one of the results, which expresses homozygous dominant. Why homozygous dominant? Because if you can see, they are written in both capital letter, making it both dominant. Okay, and since it has been said earlier that the same alleles is called a homozygous, then therefore, this two capital letter Y is called as a homozygous dominant. Okay, and then the other one, both written in small letter y. This is what we call this time a homozygous recessive as a representation of the small letter or the recessive allele in brown. Then therefore, since they are still the same, therefore we call this as homozygous, but this time recessive because they are expressed in small letters. Okay? But on the other hand, there are also times when one is written in capital and the other one is written in small letter. So therefore, that's the time that we call this as heterozygous. Okay? So again, capital letter are dominant, small letters are recessive, but when they are written as in the same case, uppercase, we call that as homozygous dominant. But if this is written in small letter, both lowercase, we call that as homozygous recessive. On the other hand, if one is written in a capital letter and the other is written in small letter, then that's the time that we call that as heterozygous. Okay? Then moving on to the next. Punnet squares helps you predict what offspring would look like. So this Punnet squares, even though it was represented just by letters, it can also predict what the offspring would look like or in its appearance. You have to take note in here, genotype and phenotype. So to define, Punnett square shows the genotype or the genetic makeup of an organism inherited from its parents, and also it shows the phenotype, which is the appearance of an organism. And how are we going to identify that or to do that? So again, I will take our example that I color as our trait, where the dominant allele written in capital letter Y is black and the recessive allele is brown, written in small letter y. Now, I have written the genotype as 25% homozygous dominant, 50% heterozygous, and 25% homozygous recessive rather. How does it happen? Okay? So if you have noticed, one of the squares or one of the results of the squares was written in both capital letter Y. That is the first. Okay, that is the first box. So if we if we express this in fraction, these squares, you can see that it is divided into 4. And when you divide this square into 4, you can see that 25% of it, or one part of its box, is expressed or has a result which is both capital letter Y, making it 25% of the whole box as ano as homozygous dominant. And if you have noticed, two boxes occupies one capital letter and one small letter. That is the second and the third box. Okay, making it 50% of the overall percentage of the box. And the remaining 25% is expressed in small letter y. Both letters written in small letter y, making it homozygous recessive. That is what makes up the genotype. The genotype comes from both parents, one from the mother, one from the father. That is what will happen when you cross it. Later, we will further describe how these results happen. But as for this discussion, since I'm discussing the genotype, let me just focus on how this genotype has been interpreted. So 25% again homozygous dominant, 50% heterozygous, and 25% homozygous recessive. Now, as for the phenotype or phenotype, you have to take note of the result, which is 75% black eyes and 25% brown eyes. How does it happen? In looking for the phenotype, since it is the uh, appearance, or it is the description of the appearance of the organism, you have to take note of the dominant and the recessive allele. And how are you going to identify that? You look at the first letter on the result. How is it written? Is it written in capital letter or is it written in small letters? And in here, you can see that 3 boxes was written in capital letter Y as the first letter of the result. So meaning to say that 3 boxes is 75% of the total percentage of the box, making it 75% black eyes. Black eyes are those dominant allele written in capital letter. And this interprets the results or the first 3 results of the cross, wherein 3 of the results was written in capital letters, or the first letters were written in capital letters, so making it 75% black eyes and 25% brown eyes. Okay, hopefully you get that. Now, to further discuss and for us to further identify the results, let me discuss these through sample problems. First, let's say this word problem. Tall plants expressed in a variable S or capital S are dominant. So meaning to say the dominant allele is expressed in letter S, which expresses or describes tall plants. Two short plants, small letter S this time. So, tall plants are dominant to short plants. Determine the genotype and phenotype ratios for a homozygous recessive female and a homozygous dominant male. Okay, so you have to take note of the given. So, in here, it has been written that a homozygous recessive female. So, if you are to take a look on that, so a homozygous female, how are you going to write a homozygous recessive female? So, a homozygous recessive female, since we use S as our variable, a homozygous recessive, meaning to say homozygous the same, recessive, small letters, they are both written in small letters. So, both are written in small letter S. So, that is how you are going to identify that. And a homozygous dominant male. So, both are written in capital letter this time. So, that is how you are going to write that. But, you are to use a Punnet square. So, how are we going to do that? Okay, so we prepare our Punnet square. Okay, so to write, I suggest that whatever is mentioned first, that is the one that you are going to write on the upper part of the box. And the second mention is the one that you are going to write on the side of the box. Each particular letter should be represented on one box only. Let me show you how. A homozygous recessive female looks like this. One box occupy the first letter, or occupied by the first letter, and one box is occupied by the second letter. Okay? To represent a homozygous recessive female, we use both letter S expressed or written in small letter, crossed by a homozygous dominant male. This time, that is the homozygous dominant male, a express in both capital letter. Now, in writing the results, you should write first the capital letter. Okay, that is the rule. To write always the capital letter. To always write the capital letter first. So, we write again. So, in here, we write first the capital letter, which is capital S followed by small letter s, because you have to take a look in here what should be combined. Since they are on the same box, should be the result, or this is how the result would be written. First, you write the capital letter and then followed by the small letter. Then, on the second box, since one here is the one that you are going to write here is a capital letter and a small letter again, because you have to cross on these two boxes the letters that is in line with it. Okay, and then on the third box, same, one capital letter and one small letter, and so as with the fourth box, that is with one capital letter and the other is a small letter. So if you have noticed, all of them in this particular results, the capital letters are the ones that were written first before the before the small letters. Even though the small letters were written on the top, still the capital letters are the one to write first. Okay, so we are asked to determine the genotype and the phenotype ratios of this particular cross. So let's start with the genotype. So as been said, the genotype is the genetic makeup. So we have to take note of homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and heterozygous. Now, if you take a look on this particular result, the genotype that you can see is 100% one capital letter and one small letter. And how do we call that? That is a heterozygous, because they are written in different way. One is capital and then the other is in small letter. So that is 100% heterozygous. Now for the phenotypic ratio, or rather genotypic ratio, that is 4:0. Why? Because all of the results were heterozygous. All those four results of the cross has a heterozygous result. None of these were expressed in either different way, either in recessive or dominant. So therefore, 4:0, because all four boxes has heterozygous. That is how you are going to write or interpret the genotypic ratio. Okay, so a comparison of how many are homozygous recessive, homozygous dominant, how many are heterozygous. But since in this result, all of them are written in heterozygous, then the genotypic ratio is first 0. Now, for the phenotype, 100% tall plants. Why did I say 100% tall plants? Because in the phenotype, what you are going to write or to look at is the first letter of the results. And how is it written? If the first letter of the results were written in capital letters, then you take a look of what the capitals represents. And in here, the capital letter S represents the tall plants. There are no results wherein the small letter S is the one that is written. So therefore, that is 100% tall plants. If there are times that small letter S is the one that is written first, then that's the time that you have to write in the phenotype short plants. But since all of the results were expressed in capital letter S, then therefore, the phenotype would be 100% tall plants, as capital S represents tall plants. Now, as for the phenotypic ratio, again, it is 4:0, because all of the results starts with capital letter S. There's nothing to compare with, so the phenotypic ratio is 4:0. Okay, so hopefully, as I am discussing the sample problems, you are getting an idea on how you are going to answer your enrichment activity 2. Okay, so let's proceed to the next. It says that purple flowers expressed in capital letter P are dominant Okay, so purple flowers, capital letter P are dominant to white flowers, small letter P in pea plants. Now we are asked to determine the genotype and phenotype ratios for both parents. Take note, both parents are heterozygous. So in here, let us prepare our Punnet square. So since both parents are heterozygous, okay, so one should be written in capital letter and the other should be written in small letter. So for both parents, we write heterozygous or one capital letter P and small letter p. Now let's predict the result. For the first box, both capital letters can be seen. So we combine these two. As a result, we will have both capital letters. Next, for the second box, one is written in capital letter and the other one is written in small letter. So as again, we write first the capital letter first. So we write capital letter P and small letter p. Now on the third box, we have capital letter P and yes, correct. Capital letter P and small letter p. So again, we write the capital letter first, making it one capital letter P and small letter p. And lastly, on the last box, both on this particular box are paralleled with small letter p. Therefore, we write it both small letter p. Now, let's interpret the results. For the genotype, you can see there 25% homozygous dominant, 50% heterozygous, and 25% homozygous recessive. Because on the first box, you can see there both are written in capital letter P. That makes up the 25% of the box. Now, two boxes occupies one capital letter P and one small letter p, making it 50% of the total box. And the remaining 25% was occupied by both letter P written in small letter. That is our genotype. Now, as for the genotypic ratio, you have to compare the boxes. How many are expressed in both capital letter P or homozygous dominant? This one represents the 25% homozygous dominant. The 50% or the 2 in here was represented by the 50% homozygous or rather heterozygous. Okay? So 2 is represented by the 2 boxes or the results or the 2 results wherein it is expressed in heterozygous. And this one is the expression of this 25% homozygous recessive, making it 1 is to 2 is to 1. 1 homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous, and 1 homozygous recessive. Okay, so that is the genotypic ratio based from the results that we get. Now, as for the phenotypes, again, for the phenotype, you have to look on how the results were written. If the results were written in capital letter or the first letter, you have to take a look on the first letter. The first letter represents the phenotype. Okay, so how many are written in capital letter P? So for the phenotype, we have there 75% purple flowers and 25% white flower. How? Because the purple flowers was represented by a capital letter P and the white flower is represented by a small letter p. And if you take a look on our results, there are 3 boxes there that results to a capital letter P written first. Okay, the first letter was expressed in capital letter P and there were 3 boxes there that starts with a capital letter P, making it 75%. And there is only one letter or there is only one results that or result rather there is only one result that starts with a small letter P, making it 25% white flower. So if we try to compare it in its ratio, there is 3 to 1. 3 purple flowers, those that starts in capital P, and there is only one white flower that starts in small letter P. That is for the phenotypic ratio. Okay? Now, let's proceed to the next. This time, what if there is only a given? There were no word problems. Okay? The only given are the variables, and so was the cross. There were no detailed word problems that explains the problem itself. So you have to take a look on, or you have to analyze, okay, to critically analyze the given. So in here, the trait given is hair color, and the hair color was represented by a dominant allele brown and a recessive allele black, okay, represented by the variable letter B. Okay, so hair color, capital letter B is brown and small letter b is black. Again, dominant trait is brown and recessive trait is black. You have to cross the parents wherein the dad is homozygous dominant and heterozygous. So homozygous dominant meaning to say the dad should be expressed in both capital letter B since it is homozygous dominant. And heterozygous this time. Okay. Heterozygous, one written in capital letter and the other written in small letter. Now, as been said, whatever is mentioned first, that is what you are going to write on the top. And in here, since the first given is the genotype of the father, so write the genotype of the father on the top of the box and the genotype of the mother on the side of the box. So in here, we have homozygous dominant and heterozygous. So if we try to combine the first box, then we can see that the resulting pair would be a homozygous dominant. The second pair would be again a homozygous dominant. The third result would be a heterozygous, and so was the last one. So as for the genotypes, there should be 50% homozygous dominant and 50% heterozygous. As for the genotypic ratio, 2 is to 2. Because if you can see, two boxes occupies both that is written in capital letters and two boxes occupies those that were written in one capital letter and one small letter. So making the genotypic ratio 2 is to 2. As for the phenotype, how many are written, how many have a result that was a capital letter B was written first. So based from this, all of them starts with the capital letter B, making it 100% brown hair. As for the phenotypic ratio, that is 4:0 because all of them starts with a letter B, making it 4:0. Okay? So as for the genotype, you have to look at both letters. Okay? For the genotypic ratio, in getting the genotypic ratio, you have to look at both letters, how they were written. Pero as for the phenotypic ratio, you only have to look on the first letter. How is it written? And you have to take note of what this capital letter represents and what this small letter represents. That is for the phenotype. Okay? Unlike with genotype that you need to take a look at both letters. Okay? Now, let's proceed. Next, this time again, an eye color. But this time, the eye color is represented by a variable G, wherein the recessive trait is blue and the dominant trait is green. So the dad and mom, or the mother and the father, are both heterozygous. So we write that as both were written in one capital letter and one is in small letter. So either you write any of them on each side or on what side, that would always, or that would only result to the same. So if we cross the genotypes of the parents, the first box would result to both capital letter G. The second box would result to one capital letter G and one small letter G. And then the other one capital letter G and one small letter G. And the fourth box, both were expressed in small letter G. Then this time, as for the genotype, okay, so there is 25% homozygous dominant, 50% heterozygous, and 25% homozygous recessive. Okay, so if you can see on how they were written, this explains the results in the box. Then the genotypic ratio would be 1:2:1. 1 homozygous dominant, then 2 heterozygous, and 1 homozygous recessive. As per the phenotype, all or three of them starts with a capital letter G, making it 75% green eyes because that was the capital letter G represents, and 25% blue eyes, one of which or the last result was was interpreted by this 25% blue eyes because it starts with a small letter G, making it 3:1. 3 green eyes and 1 blue eyes. Okay? And for another, or for, if I'm not mistaken, the last sample problem in here. So we have freckles. Freckles in Tagalog is pekas. Okay, yung mga itim-itim sa muka na nakikita natin. That is freckles. Okay? So, traits. Yung mga pekas in Tagalog kasi yun nga yun, yung mga, sa mga mestiza, yung mga mapuputi, yung may mga, tuldok-tuldok sa mukha, ayan, that is freckles. So, freckles is the trait represented by a capital letter F, those that has no freckles, and small letter F with freckles. Now, the father is heterozygous and the mom is homozygous recessive. So, meaning to say, we can write the father as one capital letter F and one small letter F representing heterozygous. The mother is homozygous recessive, making it both small letter F. So, first, write the genotype of the father at the top. So, we have there heterozygous, the mother homozygous recessive. Let's take a look at the results. The first box would be a heterozygous, the second box would be homozygous recessive, then the third box is a heterozygous, and the last box is a homozygous recessive again. So making the genotypes as 50% heterozygous and 50% homozygous recessive. Was for the genotypic ratio, two of which written in one small letter and one capital, as for the, again, for the genotypic ratio, two of the boxes resulted written in one capital letter and one small letter, and one, or rather two, that has been written in both small letters. Okay, so making it 2:2 as for the genotypic ratio. Then, for the phenotype, we have there 50% with freckles and 50% without freckles. So, what is this 50%? Two of the results starts with a capital letter F, that is without or no freckles, and another two resulted that starts with the small letter F, meaning to say with freckles, making the genotypic ratio 2:2. Okay? So, that is how you are going to solve a Punnet square using the variables that represents each particular trait and alleles. So hopefully from that particular video discussion, you have an idea and it really helps you on how you are going to answer and interpret the results of your enrichment activity too. Okay? So, if ever, again, you have questions with regards to how you are going to answer your enrichment activities, your module activities, please raise your questions to your um, class representative so I will know how can I help you. Okay, even a simple even in this simple video discussion, hopefully it helps you a lot on how you are going to answer your enrichment and module activities. Okay, so stay safe everyone and have a nice day. Thank you.